Skultety. Good morning, Stephen Skultety. Did I do it right?
Good morning, Paul. That's
That's
right.
a better way to pronounce it. I love that. What's the origin of that? It's the ethnicity or the
family
meaning
story,
of the word.
Yeah, the family story was that it was Hungarian. And so I grew up thinking it's Eastern European, and my grandparents went to Hungary looking for other Skultetys. But then my dad took a 23andMe genetic test, and it turns out it's English and German. So I don't know where the name comes from, but maybe Eastern European in there somewhere.
Yeah, but was that enough for you, or did you say, let's do this twice just to make sure?
Yeah, well, it's on my bucket list to track that down at some point.
For folks who don't know, I want to get this out of the way. As a professor of philosophy and also chair of the philosophy and religion at the University of Mississippi, and also director of the Declaration of Independence Center for Study of American Freedom, which I said earlier, I hope is like a virus and spreads across America. We certainly need it more now than ever before. But before we go to other things here, to pick your brain, what's the status of that now as far as the Declaration of Independence, the Declaration of Center? Where are we now in the development of that?
Yeah, well, the Declaration Center originally came into existence all the way back in 2007. It was actually started by a law school professor, but then after he got it up and running and approved, he ended up leaving Ole Miss to take a job elsewhere. So then it just wasn't being used. I didn't know about it for many years, but then when I heard about it in 2021, I volunteered to become director and to try to do something with it. So the center is up, it's running, it's strong, and I'm really excited to say that this coming spring, the Declaration Center will be offering Freedom Studies classes as part of a Freedom Studies minor here at the University of Mississippi. So, and we've got a number of great events also coming up and planned, including a visit from Senator Tim Scott on October 27th here on the University of Mississippi campus.
It's pretty neat to have a presidential candidate as far as a speaker this early on, so that's good news. Yeah,
well, he originally agreed to come a year ago before he had announced his presidency, but then had to reschedule at the last minute. So now that he's coming back, it's as a presidential candidate. But I'm looking forward to having a conversation with him where we kind of get off the normal talking points of the campaign trail. And I'd actually like to hear his opinion about bigger things, kind of first principles, like what is the ultimate direction of America? What is freedom going to mean in America now and going forward? How should we think about our progress as a country? And because I think right now in America, we're debating really big and fundamental things. Like what is the meaning of freedom? What is the meaning of justice? What does it mean to live in a country and to be part of a nation? And so I think it's really important that we set aside time, not just to talk about policy differences, but to talk about these big questions about the ultimate meaning of freedom in America.
Let me give you one of those. We all heard and read the stages of democracy all the way from the beginning, in bondage back to bondage. And I know you've seen that over the years. Do you think we're in the last stages?
I don't. I still have optimism. I still think there's room for progress. You know, a lot of people, as a conservative, all the times I'm having conversations with my fellow conservatives who say, look, don't worry, the pendulum will swing back. Things are just so far out of control that they'll inevitably swing back. And my response to that is, there are no pendulums. There are just people who are willing to stand up and try to do something and make changes. And I wouldn't be standing up and trying to make a change unless I really believed that there is a future. And I still believe that America was built on the idea of liberty, that we are a self-governing people, and that self-governance and liberty is still an option. And I think that message continues to resonate with people. It's just a matter of what are we going to do about it, and how are we going to take action?
Yeah. In an analogy of nitroglycerin, nitro needs glycerin, glycerin needs nitro to fulfill the job to move the mountain. Can we survive? Because you said it's individual liberty. Can you survive without the American people understanding how much faith is part of this ingredients, how much faith is part of the fabric that was woven in the initial flag and continues? And without that, I often give this analogy and I hate to do this, and I hate being redundant, but a four-way stop. If you're in the middle of nowhere in a four-way stop, there is traffic every once in a while, but it's few and far between. You're in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, and you said the hell with it, and you blow through it. And that's when accidents happens and catastrophe intervenes with your life. If you are a person of good stead, you understand the law, you understand civility, you understand the importance of your brother and sister, you stop, even though it's 2 o'clock in the morning, look both ways, and then you proceed. You obey the law at that particular time. We don't have it anymore. For the most part, we're gone. We just don't do that. We see it every day unfold in the news media. Without faith, can this type of government continue?
I do think, well, the answer is no. The basic answer is no. And I'll tell you something. The founders, when they were thinking about freedom, it meant a bunch of different things. It wasn't just one concept. I mean, I think the most familiar concept of liberty that we usually talk about now are, just being free from being interfered with, being able to act however you want. But when the founders were thinking about freedom, they were drawing on a long tradition that said that part of freedom is being a free person. And being a free person means being the kind of person who has self-composure, who has their appetites in order, who's free from sin, who has their act together in some basic way, and isn't just following whatever desire happens to pop into his or her psychology. So, being able to be a person who acts in the world in a certain way that's socially beneficial requires individual responsibility. And that's not just an add-on, an extra superfluous, spare wheel. That idea of being a certain kind of person is built in the idea of liberty itself. So I completely agree with you that without that psychological part of freedom, the rest of it doesn't work.
I think you also see that in the snatch and grab news stories where are you the kind of people, how many people do we have now in this country where if nobody's watching, you do the right thing? Right. Even though nobody's watching, you do the right thing. And I think that is slowly but surely becoming rare more and more across this country every single year. And life is being devalued. And has been devalued since the beginning of Roe versus Wade. I have an example of that may even shock you when we come back from our liberal brothers to the north in Canada. You got to hear this one. Back in a moment or two with Stephen Skultety, and he's professor of philosophy, chair of philosophy and religion. And more than that, he is the new director of the Declaration of Independence Center for the Study of American Freedom. Back with that coming up.
That the Department of Veteran Affairs offered her in writing the opportunity for a medically assisted death, even, she said, offering to provide the equipment. Now, Gauthier said she had been fighting for a home wheelchair ramp for 5 years. She described the letter she received from the department in French.
That is absolutely amazing. For 5 years, she's been trying to get a ramp. So they send her a letter, "We'll help you die." This is in Canada. And the reason I mention that is simply because what happens in Canada seems to be able to sink south a little bit, and you see the devaluing of life. And when you look at that, I remember, and I forgot who it was, basically says when Roe versus Wade first came into being, this is going to devalue life. And I could not understand as a young person then exactly what he was talking about, but I do now. Your thoughts?
Ideas matter, Paul. I mean, I think a lot of times we tend to think that the important debates are just about kind of dollars and cents kind of issues, and those are important. But it's, these big questions about what is the meaning of life, what is a human being, how should we treat each other in a political community where we're fundamentally equal under the law, how should we orient ourselves so that we have respect for one another. These big ideas, they end up influencing all of the decisions you make about how to deal with an individual veteran who's struggling to get a ramp. So, as I always tell people, you can run from philosophy, but you can't hide. I mean, ultimately, your ideas about these big questions ultimately does make a difference. And Paul's part of that story, something I see over and over again is that people just have so little respect for one another that they're no longer willing even to entertain a debate or have a dialogue with people who disagree with them about these big sort of things. And as a result, there's no kind of real discussion or inquiry into how should we think about these deep and important things in a better way.
Would you say that we probably are at the perfect storm when culture and a very debilitating increase in technology, I'm talking about social media, we had the COVID, everything brought us kind of claustrophobia to be isolated, and we have this coming together where now when we communicate, we do it through text. We don't even like to call anymore, and it's kind of the perfect storm with all of these things are happening at one time.
Yeah, I agree, and I think especially in these moments of emergency, when there's this idea that we just have to do whatever it takes, it's particularly easy to just treat each other like bureaucratic fodder, or to try and just manipulate each other to make things easy. And I really do worry that there's this relationship forming kind of between sort of people in the elite kind of versus kind of average Americans, that's basically one of contempt and just we're not treating each other seriously and we're taking each other for granted. And I think it's a major problem.
Yeah. You said something earlier that things are kind of cyclical, and I'm hoping upon hope that this is accurate. You do see some increases in juvenation or regenerating of millennials and Gen Z reaching out more for some faith-based existence, and you can see that in different locations and colleges out there. So is that something that you see happening?
I do. I think a lot of young kids are growing up in a world that's just not working very well for them. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the old promises, a lot of the old assumptions, a lot of the ideas that we've inherited, from sort of the kind of post-World War II way of looking at things, a lot of students are just finding that those ring false and that they're looking for answers. They want their lives to be meaningful. And they want to be able to find something that's bigger than themselves to be part of. They don't just want to be an Instagram post or something. They want to find things that are deeply meaningful. So I really, here's another thing that gives me hope and optimism, Paul, is that the students I work with, both on the right and the left, a lot of students are ready to genuinely engage, and they really are looking for answers, and that gives me a lot of optimism.
We got Tim Scott. What's the date? October 27th, or when is it?
October 27th. It's a Friday. 27th. It's at 3:30 in the pavilion here at Ole Miss.
Well, I got to tell you, we could have had this conversation. We need about 2 hours to do this because I've really enjoyed the conversation. So don't be a stranger. We'll get you back on. Thank you, sir. Very, very